Ruth Calloway had driven this stretch of highway 4 times before, always in daylight, always in good weather. She knew the exit for Braham's, knew the truck stop at mile marker 61, knew the place where the guardrail ended and the tree line pressed close on both sides. She was not the kind of person who got lost. The conference started at 9 the following morning. She had 6 hours of driving and 7 hours before she needed to sleep. The math was comfortable. She had a thermos of coffee in the cup holder and a lecture on rural triage protocols loaded on her phone. She was not thinking about Cora Weld. She was not thinking about Cora Weld the way you are not thinking about something that lives in a specific room of your mind and has lived there for 7 years. You keep the door closed. You walk past it. You do not rattle the handle. The fog came down near mile marker 58. Not gradually. It was clear road and then it was not. She touched the brakes. The headlights lit the fog from inside and showed her nothing, just white pressing against the glass, close and thick and wrong in the way dense fog is always slightly wrong, as though the air itself has developed a new intention. She slowed to 20, then 15. She turned on the hazards. Her phone lost signal somewhere in the next half mile. The GPS froze on a stretch of empty highway and stayed there. She tapped the screen. It did not respond. She set it down and drove by feel, keeping to what she could see of the road's edge, the fog swallowing her headlights 10 feet out. The car stopped. No warning, no cough or shudder. The engine simply ceased. She coasted to the shoulder and sat with her hands on the wheel and listened to the silence. It was complete. No wind, no insects. The fog pressed against every window and the silence pressed in behind it, and Ruth sat inside both of them and breathed. She tried the ignition. Nothing. She tried it 3 more times with the same result. She got out. The cold hit her immediately. Too cold for the season. She pulled her jacket closed and stood by the car and looked at the road in both directions. The fog had swallowed everything beyond 10 feet in any direction. She could see the asphalt beneath her feet and the white line at the road's edge and nothing else. She started walking. The town materialized around her slowly. Buildings assembled themselves out of the fog the way objects assemble themselves in a darkening room, first as shapes, then as surfaces, then as specific things with specific histories. A hardware store, a diner with its sign unlit, a pharmacy with a hand-lettered close taped inside the glass. She stood on the sidewalk and turned in a full circle. She took out her phone. Still no signal. The GPS showed her somewhere in the middle of empty highway, which meant this town did not exist on any map that mattered. The street was empty. The fog moved between the buildings in slow currents. She could smell it, not the neutral smell of weather, but something underneath that, something antiseptic, faint and institutional. She knew that smell. She had walked into it every working day for 11 years. She walked. The streets changed as she moved through them. She noticed this gradually. The hardware store gave way to a building that might have been a school. The diner's windows were dark, but something moved behind them. She did not stop to look. She kept moving because stopping felt like a decision she could not take back. The smell grew stronger, antiseptic and something below it. The specific sweetness of treated wounds, of gauze, of the ointment she had applied to burns 100 times across a decade of practice. She knew this smell at a cellular level. Her hands knew it. Her hands began to sweat inside her jacket pockets. She turned a corner and found the clinic. It was not her clinic. Her clinic was in Harlan County, 200 miles south, a low prefab building with a parking lot that flooded every spring. This was a different building, but the sign above the door used the same font, the same green lettering on white, the same style she had looked at 11 years of mornings. The sign said Rural Health, Walk INS Welcome. She stood in front of it for a long time. She pushed the door open. Inside smelled exactly right. That was the worst thing about it. Not almost right, not close. The specific combination of antiseptic and recycled air and the faint chemical sweetness of the supply closet. All of it precise and immediate, The way smell bypasses the mind and goes straight to memory. The waiting room was empty. The chairs were the same plastic as her clinic. The same arrangement. 2 rows facing the reception desk. A small table with magazines she would never update. The children's corner with its bucket of blocks. The overhead lights flickered once and held. The fluorescent buzz filled the silence. She went to the reception desk and looked behind it. Nobody there. The computer screen was on. She looked at it. A patient file was open. She looked at the name at the top of the file. Weld Cora, age 7. Date of first visit, September 14th. She stepped back from the desk. Her heel caught the chair behind her, and she grabbed the desk edge to steady herself. She stood there with both hands on the desk and looked at the screen and breathed. She had seen Cora Weld 3 times. September 14th was the first. Burns on the forearms, bilateral. The distribution was wrong for an accident. The story the mother told was wrong in the way stories are wrong when they have been assembled quickly rather than remembered. Ruth had cleaned the burns and dressed them, and she had looked at Cora Weld's face throughout, and Cora Weld had looked back at her with eyes that were very old for 7. Ruth had filed the report that afternoon. She had completed every field. She had submitted it through the county system and received an automated confirmation, and told herself she had done what she was supposed to do. The system lost it. She found out 8 months later, after the fire. She turned away from the desk. They were already in the room with her. She had not heard them. She did not know how long they had been there. 2 figures standing in the far corner beside the children's table, close together, their heads hanging forward on their chests. They were dressed in the way a nurse is dressed, white uniforms, dark stockings. But the uniforms were torn and darkly stained and hung wrong on the bodies beneath them. The figures were too tall. The proportions were close to right, but the limbs were slightly too long, the torso slightly too narrow, the angles of the joints slightly too sharp beneath the fabric. They were not moving. Ruth did not move either. She stood at the reception desk with her hands still on the edge and watched them and waited. One of them twitched. Not a full movement. A single convulsion that ran through the right shoulder and down the arm and then stopped. The head lifted a few inches and dropped again. The fluorescent light above buzzed and pulsed, and in the pulsing light the figures seemed closer than they had been. She could not say they had moved. She could not say they hadn't. She took one slow step toward the door behind the reception desk. The door that led into the examination hallway. The door she needed. The nearest figure's head came up. The face was wrong. The features were there. Eyes, nose, mouth. But they were slack and displaced, as though the skull beneath had been rearranged and the face had settled imperfectly over the new architecture. The eyes were open. They were looking at her. They were not focused the way eyes focus when a person is looking at something. They were oriented toward her, tracking her. Ruth moved for the door. The figure crossed the waiting room faster than it should have been able to. It moved in a lurch, not a stride, a full-body convulsion that covered the distance in 2 spasms of motion. It reached her before she reached the door. One hand closed on her left shoulder from behind. The grip was wrong, too strong. The fingers pressed through her jacket into the muscle beneath. She drove her elbow back hard and felt it connect with something solid. The grip loosened. She pulled forward and grabbed the door handle and turned it, and shoved through. The second figure hit the door before it closed. The door bounced back into her, and she stumbled into the hallway. She got her feet under her and turned. The second figure was through the door. The first was behind it, pushing it wider. She grabbed the nearest thing, a metal tray from the shelf beside the door, instruments scattering across the floor, and swung it at the figure in front of her. The tray connected with the side of its head. The sound was wrong, too hollow. The figure's head snapped sideways, and it dropped one knee to the floor, and she ran. She ran the length of the hallway before she registered the pain. Her left arm, below the shoulder. She looked down without stopping. The jacket was torn. Through the tear she could see the dark stains spreading. The grip had done something. The nails, The edges of those wrong fingers had opened the skin in 3 parallel lines through the fabric. She pressed her right hand against it and kept moving. The hallway was wrong in its length. Her clinic had 4 examination rooms. This hallway kept producing doors. She counted them as she moved, 6, 7, 8, and the hallway continued. The walls on both sides were the same painted cinder block, the same pale green. The fluorescent lights buzzed above her, and she did not look back. She could hear them behind her, not footsteps. A wet, irregular percussion, the sound of bodies moving in a way bodies were not designed to move, getting closer and then not closer, as though they were pacing her rather than pursuing, as though reaching her was not the point. She stopped at the first door that felt different from the others. She pressed her palm against it. Warm. She turned the handle. The room inside was examination room 1. Her examination room 1. The table with its paper runner, the rolling stool in the corner, the blood pressure cuff on the wall, the anatomy chart beside the window showing only fog. On the examination table was a set of case notes, her handwriting, her shorthand, September 14th at the top, the clinical description of Corweld's burns, the dimensions, the depth, the distribution, the improbability of the stated cause, and at the bottom in her own hand the words she had written and meant and submitted into a system that swallowed them without trace. Referral made. Awaiting response. Below that, in handwriting that was not hers, pressed deep into the paper, the letters uneven. Still waiting. She set the notes down. She pressed her right hand harder against her left arm. The bleeding had slowed but not stopped. She could feel the heat of it against her palm. She went back into the hallway. It was at the far end. Not the nurses, something else. Something that had not been there when she entered the hallway and was simply there now, the way objects are simply present in a dream. It occupied the space between her and the darkness at the hallway's end. It had begun as an examination table. She could see the frame of it, the shape of the padded surface. But it had grown and rearranged itself into something that used the table only as its center. Arms had extended from it. Long, jointed things that bent in the wrong directions, that touched the walls on both sides and the ceiling above, that ended in shapes not quite like hands. They pressed against the surfaces around them, and pushed, and the table thing moved forward on them. Its face, if it had one, was a blank oval, smooth and pale and featureless. Where a face should have been was just surface, just absence. It moved slowly. It did not lurch the way the nurses lurched. It was deliberate. It crossed the distance between them with the patience of something that had nowhere else to be. Ruth stood in the hallway and looked at it directly. She had looked at Corweld's burns and assessed them correctly. She had known what they meant and written it down, and handed the knowledge to a form and a system and a confirmation email. She had put the girl on a table and examined her, and then sent her home. She had done this 3 times. She had looked at the evidence clearly each time, and then looked away from what the evidence required. The thing in the hallway was what happened when you looked away. She walked toward it. Her left arm burned. Her right hand was still pressed against the wound. She kept her eyes on the blank oval where the face should have been. She kept walking. The arms of it extended toward her, one reaching for her right side, one from above, and she did not stop. She walked into the space between them. She felt the cold coming off the thing like cold comes off a wall in winter. She felt the arms moving in the air around her, adjusting, tracking. She did not stop. She walked through. The arms closed behind her. She felt the displacement of air. She felt the cold at her back. She did not turn around. The darkness at the end of the hallway was ahead of her. She walked into it. The girl was there. Standing at the threshold with her arms at her sides, bare feet on the linoleum, hair falling across her face, a white dress with small blue flowers across the collar. Ruth stopped 6 feet away. She had not seen Corweld's face in 7 years. She had tried not to look at it in the photographs after. But memory had kept it anyway, the way memory keeps the things you most want to release. The eyes especially, very dark, very still. The eyes of someone watching an adult decide something. The girl raised her head. The hair fell back. It was Cora's face. It was Cora's eyes. But the eyes held something that had no age. Something that had been accumulating for a long time in a place outside of time. Ruth's voice, when it came, was smaller than she intended. Cora. The girl looked at her without expression. She lifted one arm slowly and extended it, palm up, the way a child extends an arm for examination. The way Cora Weld had extended both arms on September 14th, and looked at the ceiling while Ruth assessed the damage. The burns were there, across the forearm, the same distribution, the same depth, 7 years old, and still unhealed. Ruth stepped forward. She reached out with her right hand, her good hand, the one not pressed against her own wound. She touched the edge of the burn with 2 fingers. The skin beneath was very cold. The girl's voice came from directly in front of her. "You knew," the voice said. Ruth did not answer. "You knew," the voice said again, "and you let the system decide." The lights went out. When they came back, the hallway was empty. The girl was gone. Ruth was standing alone with her arm extended and her 2 fingers touching nothing. She lowered her arm. She stood there for a moment. Her left arm throbbed. She lifted her right hand away from the wound and looked at the tear in her jacket. The bleeding had stopped. The lines were clean and dark through the torn fabric. They would need attention, not here. She walked back down the hallway. The examination table creature was gone. The hallway had the right number of doors now, 4, the correct number. She walked through the waiting room. The nurses were gone. The children's corner was undisturbed. The bucket of blocks sat exactly where it always sat. She went through the front door and into the fog. The town was different now. The buildings she had passed on the way in had changed. The hardware store had light in its windows, not electric light, something warmer and older. The diner's sign was lit. It said Toluca Diner. The name meant nothing to her and frightened her anyway. She walked back the way she had come. She kept her eyes on the fog ahead. She did not look into the lit windows she passed. She found the road. She followed it out of town by feel, by the texture of the asphalt under her shoes, by the white line at the edge that appeared and disappeared ahead of her. She walked for a long time. Her car was where she had left it. She got in. She sat in the driver's seat and looked at her hands. She tried the ignition. The engine turned over immediately, smooth and clean, as though it had never stopped. She pulled onto the road and drove. The fog thinned over the next 2 miles and then it was gone. The night was clear and cold, and the highway ran straight ahead under a sky full of stars. She checked her phone. The signal was back. The GPS showed her on the highway, exactly where she should be. She drove carefully, both hands on the wheel. She did not turn on the lecture about rural triage protocols. She was thinking about September 14th, about the second visit in November. Cora in the waiting room in long sleeves, the referral still outstanding, Ruth running 40 minutes behind. About the third visit in January, a Friday. She had treated the presenting complaint and sent them home and told herself the system was handling it. She had told herself for 8 months. She reached for the thermos. Her left arm pulled sharply at the movement. She set the thermos back without opening it. In the rearview mirror, the highway ran back into darkness. Clear road, empty and straight. Then the fog. Not covering the whole mirror, just at the edges, just beginning, the way it had come down before, not gradually but all at once, as though it had been waiting for her to look. She turned her eyes back to the road ahead. The fog was there too, thin at first, just a haze around the treeline, thickening as she watched, her headlights catching the particles of it and throwing them back. Her phone signal dropped. She kept driving. The fog pressed in from both sides. The highway narrowed in her headlights to a tunnel of white. She could smell it through the car's ventilation. Antiseptic. And below that the sweetness she knew. The specific sweetness of treated wounds. On the road ahead, at the edge of where her headlights reached, a small shape stood in the center of the lane. She touched the brakes. Arms at its sides, bare feet on the asphalt, a white dress with small blue flowers at the collar. She stopped the car. The fog closed in completely. The shape at the edge of her headlights did not move. It stood in the white light and looked at her across the distance between them. Ruth Calloway sat in the stopped car, her left arm burned. The 3 lines through her jacket were dark and clean and real. This place had marked her. It intended to keep her. She had filed the report. She had used the correct form. She had been right about the burns and right about the cause and right about every clinical judgment she had ever made. She sat with all of that. She felt it for exactly what it was. The shape in the headlights raised one arm, palm up, the old gesture, patient and specific and 7 years old, and waiting. Ruth's hands came off the wheel. She reached for the door handle.
If you enjoyed this video, please do not forget to like, comment, or share this video with your friends. Subscribe to our channel to hear more stories like this one.